The morning breeze still clung to the edge of autumn, crisp against the rising warmth of another day at the VA Medical Center in St. Louis. It was early, too early for most of the parking lot to be full. Only a few sedans lined the painted asphalt, and a lone maintenance van idled near the rear dock, its engine ticking like an old wristwatch cooling down. The glass entry doors opened with a tired hiss, and Maggie, Lane stepped through. She didn't look like trouble, didn't look like a mystery, but she wasn't there to be looked at. Maggie was 54, built strong and solid like someone who still mowed her own lawn and changed her own oil. Her weathered black boots made soft contact with the linoleum floors, boots that had clearly walked more than most folks in that building had driven. Her jeans were faded at the knees and thighs, not for style, but from real work. A plain white t-shirt peeked out from beneath a zipped-up windbreaker, and a simple gold watch, worn but still ticking, glinted faintly in the overhead light. Her silver-gray hair was braided neatly down her back, not out of fashion, but habit, discipline that came from decades of routines most people wouldn't understand. She moved with a slight limp, not from weakness, just the kind of gait that said, yes, something happened. No, it didn't stop me. In one hand, she carried a weathered leather wallet. In the other, a canvas folder, the kind you'd expect to see on a Navy ship in the 70s, marked only with the faint, smudged letters EZ, initials that meant nothing to most. But not to all. The VA's front lobby was designed like any government building. Efficient, impersonal. Wide floor space, sterile light, beige walls. Country music hummed faintly from a forgotten radio on the counter. The kind of background noise meant to feel like comfort, but really just kept silence from getting awkward. 2 young security guards stood behind the ID station, looking like they'd been there since before sunrise. The taller one, Private Chad Mercer, couldn't have been more than 22. Soft features, brand new buzz cut, hands still too clean. His partner, PFC Ryan Maddox, was barely older, leaning back against the wall, coffee cup balanced on one knee, scrolling something on his phone. They looked up when she approached. "Morning, ma'am," Chad said, his voice flat, already half bored. Maggie didn't say a word. She just slid her old military ID across the counter. Chad blinked when he saw it. It was ancient, laminated plastic, corners worn nearly round, surface dulled by years of handling. The photo showed a much younger Maggie, expression flat, eyes sharp, jaw squared. Not a woman who smiled for cameras. Not back then. Ryan leaned over and snorted. "What is this? Phase 1 clearance from the Cold War? Looks like it expired before I was even born." Chad joked. They chuckled. Loudly. "She print this off the Smithsonian website." Ryan asked, grinning wide. "Ma'am, you might want to update this with something post-9/11. Still, Maggie didn't flinch, didn't speak. Just waited. "Let's see if this old thing even scans," Chad said, lifting the ID like it might fall apart in his hand. He waved it under the reader with exaggerated slowness. The red scanner light blinked once, then again. The screen flashed, unrecognized format. "Please retrieve." "Told ya," he said, grinning as he slid it back toward her. "Unless this thing's got some magic clearance. It ain't getting you in today." Maggie said nothing, but her eyes weren't on them. They were locked on the scanner. Above the screen, a small amber light had started blinking. Chad, amused, waved the card again. This time slower, with a mock chant, "Please work, oh mighty relic." This time, the scanner responded with a snap. Not digital, mechanical, followed by a low hum that seemed to echo from somewhere far deeper in the building's system. The screen went black. Then something new appeared. A glowing gold circle. Inside of it, a black downward pointing triangle began rotating slowly on the screen. Strange, encrypted symbols pulsed around the emblem. Neither Chad nor Ryan recognized the symbol, but they knew enough to know it didn't belong to anything ordinary. Then came the text. FLHPLALPHA5. Redizo Evorzid. Identitler Kof RMED. 2 sharp beeps echoed. Then the scanner locked. Clunk. Ryan froze, coffee halfway to his lips. Chad's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't dare touch it. Maggie looked up, calm as ever. "Looks like the card worked," she said softly. The words landed like a thunderclap. No one laughed anymore. The scanner's hum deepened. Not the usual soft chirp of a card being denied. This one vibrated through the counter, through the floor tiles like something old waking up, something that hadn't made a sound in a very long time and wasn't meant to anymore. Private Chad Mercer stepped back from the terminal, his grin faltering. The screen, which had flashed a generic error a moment ago, now faded to black, not blue, not glitchy, just completely, utterly black. Then came the gold. First, a faint shimmer, like light reflecting off metal underwater. Then it sharpened, and Emblem's a golden ring, glowing softly, inside of which turned a black downward, pointing triangle. Not animated like some screensaver. It spun with weight, like it had gears behind it. The edges blurred with speed, but never lost focus. The entire thing pulsed with a slow rhythm, as if sensed to a heartbeat none of them could hear. Around it, strange symbols in red and amber flickered, none of them in any language the guards recognized. What is that?" Ryan Maddox whispered, his voice no longer teasing. Chad leaned forward, mesmerized. "I've never seen this before. Not even in training sims." Suddenly, across the screen, in bold red letters, appeared a line that made both young soldiers go still. "F-Laj Piro Call ALPA 5 Radi Zoe aus MDI Verify ED." Two sharp electronic beeps followed. Not the soft ones they'd heard earlier. These were deliberate, urgent, like a decision had been made. And then, the terminal locked. Not a simple freeze. Not a system hang. The kind of lock that came with a heavy internal thunk, like a safe door had just sealed itself. Okay. What the hell is this?" Ryan asked, his coffee forgotten in midair. The emblem on the screen continued rotating. Faster now, the triangle nearly a blur, but somehow still precise, like it was being driven by a program designed for something far more serious than checking visitor IDs. Maggie Lane hadn't moved. She stood perfectly still, watching the sequence unfold like she had seen it before. Not recently, maybe, but once long ago. The air in the lobby shifted. Not in temperature, in pressure. That invisible heaviness that comes when a room suddenly knows it's part of something bigger, something no one there is qualified to handle. A soft whir echoed from overhead. Amber lights began flashing in the ceiling corners. 1, then 2, then 4, creating a pattern that spread like wildfire through the corridor. Down the hallway, by the vending machines, a technician dropped his clipboard as his radio crackled to life. "Is this a drill?" Someone whispered. "No," someone else replied. "We've never trained for this code." At the scanner, Chad's fingers hovered an inch from the keyboard, trembling. "This isn't normal," he muttered. I don't even know what this is." Then came the siren, a low, pulsing alarm that didn't scream but insisted. It wasn't loud enough to panic people, but it was steady enough to stop conversations. Around the room, staff members froze mid-task. Phones were set down. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Everyone looked toward the source, the screen, the emblem, the woman. Ryan leaned over to Chad. "That clearance level," it said Alpha 5. That's not base level. That's somewhere way above us." Maggie's eyes remained on the terminal, but her voice cut through the air like a calm blade. "It means I'm not here by accident." A full 10 seconds passed before anyone breathed. From behind the reinforced glass at the security booth, another guard, a man in his 50s with decades of service behind him, picked up a red phone on the wall. His hand shook as he keyed into a secure line. "This is Security Station 1, he said into the receiver. "We've got an Alpha 5 flag protocol activation. Live, this is not a drill. Repeat, this is live. Requesting immediate command level verification." At the front desk, Chad stumbled back. I think we just messed up, man." "You think?" Ryan's voice cracked. "This is above Homeland. This is, like, national command level. What the hell does Alpha 5 even mean?" Behind them, a fire door hissed open and slammed shut. 2 uniformed MPs, military police, appeared in the hallway, walking in crisp formation. 1 male, 1 female. Their uniforms weren't the standard issue for base security. These were operational grade. Their eyes scanned the room with practiced calm until they found Maggie. They didn't shout, didn't raise a weapon. They simply walked toward her, flanking her without touching her. "Ma'am," the male MP said, his voice firm but respectful. "We're here to escort you to interim command processing for verification and liaison protocol." He wasn't asking, but he wasn't ordering either. It was the military's version of, "If you would please." spoken with the full knowledge that refusal wasn't necessary and force wasn't appropriate. Maggie gave the faintest nod. No drama, no speech, just stepped forward. The triangle on the screen kept spinning behind her, still rotating, still glowing. Ryan and Chad stepped back as she passed. Instinctively, she didn't look at them. She didn't have to. By the time the door to the secured hallway closed behind her, the lobby had fallen into absolute silence, except for the quiet whir of the spinning emblem. Still turning, still watching, the emblem on the screen continued to rotate, slow, steady, unblinking. No one in the VA lobby spoke. The siren had stopped, replaced by something worse: silence. The kind that settles after the wind shifts on a battlefield. The kind that means everyone is waiting for orders, but no one knows who's in charge anymore. Behind the scanner desk, Private Chad Mercer couldn't stop staring at the screen. Alpha 5, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. There's no Alpha 5 in the system. At least not in anything we ever trained on. PFC Ryan Maddox rubbed the back of his neck. Eyes darting between the locked terminal and the hallway Maggie Lane had just disappeared into, flanked by 2 military police who hadn't even asked for ID. I think we just poked something we were never supposed to touch. That's when the door to the side hallway slammed open with authority. Sergeant First Class Henry Delaney entered like a man who'd been called out of a warm office and was already 3 hours behind on paperwork. Stocky mid-50s, buzzed gray hair, and the kind of permanent squint that came from years of not trusting digital systems. His security vest was snug across a chest built like a brick wall, and his clipboard was already in his hand. What the hell's going on out here? He barked, scanning the faces in the lobby. Chad stepped forward like he'd just been pulled into the principal's office. Sir, we scanned an old ID. It didn't match any known format. We joked about it. Delaney raised a brow. You joked about an ID that triggered lockdown protocol. Ryan jumped in. We didn't know it would. It looked fake, like way out of date. We thought it was a mistake. Then the system did this. Chad added, motioning helplessly to the terminal. And it hasn't stopped since. Delaney stepped up to the scanner, the gold emblem now glowing steadily like it was breathing. The rotating triangle remained smooth, hypnotic, still cycling, still active. When he read the red line at the bottom of the screen, F-Ladish article ALPH5RD0EO I did T2 so far made, he stared for a beat longer than he should have. Alpha 5, he repeated, quieter this time. Ryan nodded. Sir, what even is that? Delaney didn't answer. He turned toward the security booth, barking at the older guard behind the glass. Who did you call? Command. The man replied, his voice tight. Red phone. They patched me straight through to Federal Ops. They said to hold everything and await senior-level response. Delaney looked back at the screen. You boys understand what you just did. Chad swallowed. No, sir. You mocked someone carrying a credential tied to a clearance level that doesn't even appear in regular military protocol. Alpha 5 isn't even supposed to exist outside of Cold War-era black programs. But she didn't look like anything special. Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper now. She just looked like, I don't know, a retired schoolteacher or something. Delaney turned slowly. Exactly. That single word hit heavier than a shout. The 2 guards said nothing more. Their confidence had drained completely, replaced by a growing awareness that this wasn't about a card anymore. It was about her, who she was, and what she'd been part of. Then came the second alarm, shorter, sharper. A light above the administrative hallway turned red. From the far end, a new figure appeared, this one in full command fatigues. Not a VA administrator, not a security officer. Colonel Dana Whitmore. She didn't walk into the room, she took it. Early 60s, still fit enough to intimidate officers half her age. Haircut regulation short, her silver oak leaf insignia gleaming against the dark green of her flight jacket. She carried no briefcase, no sidearm, no aide at her side. She didn't need them. Her presence alone was enough to make half the lobby instinctively stand straighter. Who triggered the Alpha 5 protocol? She asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The kind that had once cut through helicopter rotors and battlefield chaos alike. No one answered right away. Ryan pointed toward the scanner. It was the card. Hers? Conal Whitmore turned to the screen. Her eyes narrowed, and in that instant something changed in her face. Recognition. She knew that emblem. Delaney stepped forward, trying to reclaim some control. "Mom, I was just about to contact." "Stand down, Sergeant," Whitmore said, her tone firm but measured. "You're not in charge of this anymore." He froze mid-sentence. Whitmore approached the desk, eyes on the scanner. "This is no breach, no spoof. That emblem is authentic. That protocol hasn't activated in over 25 years." She turned to the staff gathered around, including Mendoza, Maddox, and the clerks now pretending not to be listening. "Let me be absolutely clear. What you just saw is not a software glitch or a legacy system quirk. That is real. That is live. And whoever just walked into this building under that clearance level outranks everyone here." She paused, then added, "including me." Behind her, the MPs had returned to secure the corridor. Maggie had disappeared down. Ryan glanced sideways at Chad. "What happens now?" Chad didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time in his short military career, he realized he was in the presence of something no manual had prepared him for. A story no one was supposed to hear. A person no one was supposed to remember. And a clearance level that officially didn't exist. The VA lobby felt like it had stopped breathing. Conal Dana Whitmore stood at the scanner terminal, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the still, rotating triangle on the screen. Behind her, the red alert light above the admin corridor flashed silently, painting the room in intermittent crimson. The golden ring around the triangle pulsed in time with the ambient hum, like it was keeping its own heartbeat. No one dared speak, until the voice returned. It came from the overhead speakers, calm and measured. No panic, no confusion, just authority. "Protocol Alpha 5 confirmed. Subject verified. Do not detain, initiate courtesy protocols. Escort to command processing. Repeat, do not detain." Private Chad Mercer blinked. "Courtesy protocols." PFC Ryan Maddox leaned in, whispering, "I don't know what that means, but it sure doesn't sound like take her to holding." Conal Whitmore turned sharply, her voice cool as steel. "It means stand down, gentlemen. Whatever she carries, it's more than just clearance. It's legacy." Before either of them could respond, the double doors at the far end of the corridor opened, revealing two uniformed figures stepping in sync, military police, but not the base kind. These two were different, clean-cut, quiet, minimal gear but perfectly maintained. Their boots didn't echo on the tile. Their eyes scanned the room without judgment, but with absolute awareness. The man, tall and calm, looked like someone who once served in airborne. The woman, compact and sharp-eyed, wore a ribbon on her collar that most personnel wouldn't even recognize. They said nothing at first. They didn't have to. The male MP stepped forward, nodded respectfully to Whitmore, then addressed the room with clear, formal tones. "Escort assigned. Subject to be treated with full honors. Movement authorized. No obstruction." Delaney looked like he'd just been hit with a regulation manual he'd never read before. "They're treating her like visiting brass." "No," Whitmore said softly. "Worse. They're treating her like a secret that finally surfaced." The two MPs moved down the hallway with the kind of silent precision that made even seasoned veterans stand back. And then she returned. Maggie Lane walking calmly between the MPs, same measured stride, same silver braid tied low down her back. Still in her windbreaker and worn jeans. Still holding the same canvas folder under her left arm. But something was different now. It wasn't just the lights or the hush that had fallen over the building. It was the way people looked at her. Not with suspicion, not with curiosity, but with something close to reverence and a whole lot of confusion. She didn't look left or right. Didn't wave, didn't nod. She simply walked. Like this was routine. Like she had done this before. Like corridors full of tension were just another Tuesday. They passed Chad and Ryan without a word. Ryan instinctively straightened up, his hand twitching toward a salute, but stopping midway. What was the protocol when you had no idea what you were standing in the presence of? Chad couldn't even meet her eyes. He just stepped back, as if her presence might trigger something else if he got too close. Behind them, the glowing screen on the scanner continued its silent loop. Whitmore followed the trio at a distance, hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. But those who watched closely would have seen it. a flicker of something rare in the Conal's steel-hard demeanor. Respect. Maybe even guilt. The corridor leading to the administrative annex was lined with posters, plaques, and framed photos of facility directors and command officers. But Maggie didn't look at any of them. She wasn't here to be reminded of who had been in charge. She was the reason some of them had been in charge. They turned the corner and disappeared down a secured hallway. The door sealed shut behind them with a hydraulic hiss. The red light above it blinked once, then turned solid green. The lobby remained frozen. No one moved. No one reached for their phone. No one whispered. The only sound was the soft clatter of a janitor's cart turning a corner far off in the distance, like the world was trying to pretend everything was still normal. Conal Whitmore returned a moment later. Her tone was now more formal. To all personnel on shift, what you saw this morning is to be treated as classified. No names, no reports, no speculation. Any inquiries are to be directed through command, level chains only. Delaney raised a cautious hand. Who was she? Whitmore paused. Then, someone who's given more to this country than any of us have clearance to understand. Chad looked over at Ryan, whose face had turned pale. We called her a joke. Ryan murmured. You didn't just call her a joke. Whitmore said, her voice firm. You mocked a ghost. And ghosts don't forget. She turned toward the command hallway, where Maggie had vanished. Then, in a quieter voice, more to herself than anyone else, she added, and neither do I. The command annex was no longer quiet. Staff moved with purpose now, tight-lipped, eyes down, hands gripping folders as if paperwork could protect them from whatever had just walked through their building. And in a glass, walled conference room at the end of the corridor, Maggie Lane sat alone. She didn't fidget, didn't lean back, didn't check her watch. She simply sat, hands resting calmly on the table, shoulders square, as if she'd been in this room 100 times before. Maybe she had. Maybe not this exact one, but rooms like it. Rooms that locked from the outside. Rooms where decisions got made and then erased. Outside, 4 VA administrators stood huddled around a printer, pretending to review files. But their eyes kept drifting toward the woman behind the glass. None of them spoke. Then the door at the far end of the annex burst open. Not rudely, just with authority. Colonel Tessa McBride entered like a thunderclap wrapped in a flight jacket. She didn't bring aids. She didn't carry a tablet. She didn't need either. Silver hair cropped regulation short. Oak leaf insignia gleaming. Combat boots polished to a mirror sheen. She didn't ask who was in charge. She was in charge. Her voice rang out before anyone could speak. Who triggered Flag Protocol Alpha 5? She demanded. And why wasn't I notified the instant it happened? Everyone around her suddenly found their clipboards fascinating. One young officer started to speak about outdated credentials and system errors. But McBride silenced him with a single look. She turned sharply into the glass conference room and stopped when her eyes fell on Maggie. She blinked once, then nodded, just slightly. Maggie Lane, she said, her voice quieter now, still impossible to surprise. Maggie offered the faintest smile. I thought you were in Europe. I was? Until 5 hours ago. Command pulled me mid-flight. You still know how to make waves. Outside the glass walls, the staff exchanged wide-eyed looks. McBride turned to address the room. Let me make something very clear. That is not a system malfunction. That is not an outdated card, or a forged credential, or a drill you missed a memo on. That, she pointed toward the locked screen still showing the spinning emblem, is real. From the inside pocket of her jacket, McBride pulled a black folder with a red bordered cover, the kind of file no one is supposed to carry outside of a secure vault. She opened it and held up a single document. Nearly the entire page was redacted in thick black lines, but at the top was a crisp, unmistakable emblem, a gold circle, a black triangle, and the words ECHO0. A few people gasped. McBride read aloud from the margin, her voice flat. Authorization level classified. Above presidential access. Total operatives issued 6. Confirmed status 4 deceased, 1 missing. Presumed dead. 1 living. She looked up again, eyes locking on Maggie. And she's sitting right here. In the back of the room, Chad and Ryan had somehow made their way upstairs. The 2 junior guards stood pressed against the far wall, looking like they wanted to vanish into the drywall. McBride's gaze fell on them next. You too? She said. Laughed at a woman who served in a program that never existed. A woman who wore no stars, no ribbons, but was cleared above nearly every general you've ever heard of. The silence thickened, effective immediately. McBride continued, not raising her voice. Privates Mercer and Maddox are reassigned to facilities maintenance. Report to Custodial Supervisor Harris at US 600. You'll start with floors and latrines. You'll work quietly. You'll learn to pay attention, not to the uniform or the age, but to the presence. She didn't wait for them to respond. She knew they wouldn't. To their credit, they didn't argue. They just nodded. Maggie, still seated in the glass room, didn't react. She didn't need to. Her existence had already rewritten the atmosphere of the building. McBride closed the red file and tucked it back inside her jacket. To the rest of you, she said, addressing the gathered personnel, I'll remind you that Echo Zero does not appear on any public records. It never has. It never will. If anyone asks what happened this morning, the answer is simple: a security system was tested. It responded appropriately. No names. No statements. A beat, then quieter. No mistakes. She stepped into the conference room, the glass door clicking softly behind her. Only then did Maggie speak again. You still carry the file. McBride gave a tight nod. Some things deserve to be remembered, even if they can't be shared. They looked at each other for a moment that stretched longer than it needed to. Two professionals, both wearing invisible scars, both knowing too much about what silence can cost. Then Maggie said something that brought a ghost of a smile to McBride's lips. You always did love a dramatic entrance. And you always did know when to disappear, McBride replied. Outside, the red light above the corridor flicked off. But something had changed. People didn't go back to business as usual. Not really. Because once you see a legend in jeans and a windbreaker walk through your door with a clearance no one can explain, you don't forget it. Not ever. The conference room emptied without ceremony. There were no salutes, no applause, not even a handshake. Just the quiet click of a door unlocking and the distant hum of the building returning, however uneasily, to its bureaucratic rhythm. Colonel Tessa McBride walked beside Maggie Lane, guiding her down the long hallway that connected the annex to the private side exit. The hush that followed them wasn't born from secrecy anymore. It was respect. Quiet, overdue respect. The only sound between them at first was the soft cadence of polished boots and scuffed work boots tapping tile. Two different lives. Same rhythm. You know. McBride finally said, We never deactivated your access. Maggie didn't look at her. I figured, why argued about it? After you walked away. Some wanted everything scrubbed. ID records, even biometric traces. But I told them, some clearances don't expire. Not really. Maggie raised an eyebrow, her voice calm. And the system. We left it in, McBride replied. Just in case. Hidden deep. Buried under a dozen shell programs, just like Echo Zero itself. And yet, someone still found me when I scanned in. Someone's always watching, McBride said. We built it that way. The only question was whether you'd ever come back. Maggie gave a soft, humorless chuckle. Didn't plan to. McBride nodded. But you did. They paused in front of a framed portrait, an older man in dress blues, silver hair, soft smile. You remember Hammond? McBride asked, gesturing toward the photo. Maggie studied it for a moment. He listened more than he talked. He's the one who fought to keep your access alive. Said it was wrong to delete you, no matter what the brass said. Told them some ghosts are better left on the roster. Maggie looked away. Ghosts don't age well. No, McBride agreed. But they remember what the living forget. They continued walking, passing old bulletin boards, a display case of medals no one had earned recently, and a flag folded neatly in glass, dedicated to unnamed contributions. Neither spoke for several paces. Then McBride asked, softly, You carrying much weight these days? The question floated for a moment, heavier than any file or clearance. Maggie didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was measured, lived in. Weight doesn't go anywhere, Tessa. You just get better at carrying it. McBride stopped walking. She looked at Maggie, not the name, not the title, not the clearance. The woman, the soldier, the one who never asked for recognition and never needed it. You still talk like someone who could run a mission blindfolded. I still remember the ones we didn't come back from. The colonel nodded, as if receiving coordinates only she could understand. For a moment, they stood by a narrow window. Outside, the morning sun had climbed high enough to bake the asphalt of the visitor lot, sending shimmering waves of heat up from the concrete. Below, Maggie's old truck still sat alone in the corner space. It looked out of place, like she always had. "Tessa," Maggie said quietly, eyes on the lot. "Why me? What do you mean? Why let me keep it? That level of access, that piece of the machine. I was never supposed to be remembered." McBride folded her arms. Her voice was lower now, gentler. "Because I remember who held the line when the line didn't exist on paper. I remember who made the calls when no one else could afford to. And because, God help me, I believe some people don't get erased just because the mission file says they never existed." They resumed walking. McBride kept her voice casual, but her eyes betrayed a question she hadn't yet asked. "You ever think about coming back?" she said. "Not officially. Just mentoring, quiet stuff. Teaching the young ones when to keep their mouths shut." Maggie gave a half smile. "I think about a lot of things. Most of them I decide against." "Fair," McBride said. "But you should know there are people who could use your voice. The ones who think courage comes with medals and volume." Maggie didn't respond. But something in her step softened. As they neared the exit, McBride slowed her pace. "They think it's about orders," she said. "Rank, clearance. But what it really comes down to, what still gets whispered in certain rooms, is who shows up when no one else is cleared to walk through the door." She looked sideways. "You showed up." Maggie didn't stop walking. "I always do." McBride pressed the button to open the final security door. The metal slid aside with a familiar hydraulic hiss, revealing the sunlit loading bay. It wasn't glamorous. No flags. No escort. Just the ordinary hum of industrial life resuming outside a building that had briefly remembered something extraordinary. McBride held the door open. "Take care of yourself, Maggie. I always do. And if you ever need anything, I know where to find you." Maggie stepped into the light. Her boots tapped the concrete ramp as she made her way to the truck. She didn't look back. Didn't wave. She didn't have to. McBride stood there for a long moment, watching the truck start up. The engine coughed, then settled into a low, steady rumble, just like the woman behind the wheel. And then the vehicle pulled away, disappearing into the mirage, like heat shimmer rising off the blacktop. Inside, no one dared speak her name. Outside, she carried it with her. The parking lot outside the VA facility shimmered under the late morning sun. Heat waves rose from the asphalt like smoke from an old battlefield, distorting the edges of everything in sight, except one thing. Maggie Lane's truck. It sat just where she'd left it, tucked in a quiet corner, away from the reserved slots and the polished SUVs of staff who hadn't noticed history walking past them. She opened the door with the same steady rhythm she'd shown all morning. No rush, no hesitation. The hinges creaked like an old friend clearing its throat. The engine turned over on the first try. Inside, the cab was worn but clean, simple. There was a folded map on the passenger seat, a black ball cap with no emblem, and an old radio tuned low to a country station that hadn't changed its playlist since the 80s. She shifted into drive and didn't look back. Inside the VA building, life had technically resumed. Phones rang. Keys clicked. Medical staff returned to filing. Security returned to posture. But no one really went back to normal, not after what they'd seen. The scanner terminal still blinked softly, though the emblem had long faded from the screen. No one touched it. Not even Chad Mercer or Ryan Maddox, now in gray maintenance coveralls, carrying mops down the same hallway where they'd once leaned too casually on a desk they didn't understand. As Maggie's truck passed the gate, Ryan caught a glimpse of her through the windshield. Their eyes met for a split second. He raised a hand. It wasn't a wave, not exactly. More like acknowledgement. Maggie gave a single nod. Not forgiveness, not disdain, just understood. Then she was gone, turning onto the access road, her taillights melting into the horizon like a rumor you're not sure you were supposed to hear. On the third floor of the administrative annex, Colonel Tessa McBride stood by the window, arms folded, watching that truck disappear. The younger officer beside her, Lieutenant Sanders, barely 30, held a tablet loaded with incident reports, system readouts, and half a dozen requests for clarification. "Colonel," Sanders said hesitantly, "what should I put in the official record?" McBride didn't answer right away. She followed the truck's silhouette until it vanished into the distant heat. Only then did she speak. "Log it as a routine system verification. No incident. No breach." Sanders hesitated. "Ma'am," the woman, her clearance. "Alpha 5. McBride turned from the window, her expression unreadable. "Alpha 5, she said. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sanders blinked. "Mem." She stepped past him, calm and composed, as if she hadn't just watched a ghost from military legend walk through her building unannounced. "Alpha 5 clearances don't exist," she said. "And you should forget you ever saw one." She walked down the corridor, leaving behind a lieutenant, a lockdown terminal, and a building that would take weeks to stop whispering. Miles away, Maggie Lane merged onto the interstate. The road stretched out in front of her, wide and unbothered, lined by trees that had long ago learned to sway quietly in the wind. The kind of road that didn't ask questions about where you'd been or why you left. She adjusted the rearview mirror. Behind her, the VA facility had become just another gray structure tucked between exit signs and federal silence. She didn't need to see it again. She had lived it. She had survived it. And she had reminded it, without fanfare, without force, that respect is not something you earn after proving yourself. It is something others owe you the moment you walk in the door, until you prove you don't deserve it. Not the other way around. No citation would be made. No medals would be reissued. No history books would update their footnotes. But somewhere deep in the server logs of a forgotten clearance system, one flag had blinked, then gone dark, just as it was designed to do. And in a dozen offices across the country, where whispers still traveled through secure lines and past weathered voices, one phrase would be spoken softly over coffee, and under breath, "She used the card." And the answer would always be the same: "Then it must have been important." Some warriors wear their legacy in silence, not because they're hiding, but because they've already paid the price of being known. There's something powerful about a person who doesn't ask to be noticed. They don't wear medals. They don't demand applause. They simply walk through the door with quiet confidence. Not because they need you to know who they are, but because they know exactly who they are. Maggie Lane reminded us of something we too often forget in today's world: respect isn't a reward. It's the starting point. You give it freely, not because someone's loud, young, decorated, or impressive, but because you never know what they've carried or who they once had to be when no one else could. We live in a time where people are judged by their looks, their age, or whether they fit the mold. But some of the strongest among us, veterans, elders, those who've served quietly, walk among us every day, never needing to be thanked, but deeply deserving to be seen. Never underestimate someone because of how they look. Never mock what you don't understand. And above all, never forget that dignity doesn't come from titles. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one is watching. Have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary until you learned what they'd lived through? Do you believe we've forgotten how to respect first and question later? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just remind someone else what honor really looks like. Hit that like button to honor the quiet warriors. Subscribe for more stories like Maggie's, stories of unseen valor, dignity defended, and legacies that never needed a microphone. And if you know someone who served, or someone who's ever been overlooked, send them this video. Sometimes the loudest message comes from the one person who says nothing at all.